All right, guys, let's see if I can pull this off here. There's a video I want you to watch, but he doesn't exactly show you the motions of the muscles, and I think that that will be helpful. So I'm going to watch this video with you, and then there'll be a quiz after this, just to make sure you are following along at home, because we got to get these muscles in your head somehow. So let me share the screen.
Hey, I'm James, and in this video I'm going to discuss the musculature of the back. The main focus of the video is on the arrangement of the muscles.
This is a group called Geekymedics, and they have a lot of great stuff.
As I go through the layers. Check out the fantastic articles on the Geekymedics website to get more information on the muscles of the back. Subscribe to Geekymedics to be the first to know when we release new videos. The muscles of the back are described as being arranged in a series of layers, and it is often good to think about the musculature in this way, as it helps break the muscles up, which I find helps with learning them. I am going to build upon the arrangement described in the articles on the Geekymedics website by including some additional terms and muscles. It is generally agreed that the muscles are divided into an extrinsic group and an intrinsic group, or true group. The extrinsic group are muscles that have an influence on the upper limb, and therefore run from the upper limb and the axial skeleton, as indicated in this text box here, or have a role in respiration or proprioception, as indicated in this text box. The intrinsic, or true muscles of the back, lie deep to the extrinsic muscles. These are also arranged in layers from superficial to deep, and categorizing them in this way tends to facilitate learning. I have added the sub-occipital muscle group to the intrinsic muscles, which builds upon the articles on the Geekymedics site. Throughout the video, I will also refer to this schematic, which will hopefully help with visualizing where the muscles are in relation to each other.
So you're looking as if the spine was chopped in half, and there's the spine is the big narrow-filled thing there, so they can tell you how deep or superficial these are.
Muscle layers in different regions of the vertebral column. It makes sense to work from superficial to deep. And so I'll start with
you see the spine, but then you also see the strange thing there that with the three fingers sticking down like that. That is the vertebrae, like a transverse view.
And upper limb. A common feature of these muscles is that all of them, except trapezius, are innervated by nerves derived from the brachial plexus. So let's start with trapezius and latissimus dorsi. Trapezius is a large triangular flat muscle that extends from T12 to the external occipital protuberance. All fibers from these attachments then converge on the clavicle and scapula. The muscle is divided into an upper, middle, and lower fiber group that all have different actions of the scapula. So have a look at the superficial back muscles article for the actions of each part of the trapezius. It is innervated by the spinal accessory nerve. The latissimus dorsi is attached to the iliac crest, lumbar, and lower thoracic regions on the axial skeleton. The tendon continues towards the upper limb to insert on the floor of the intertubercular sulcus of the humerus. The muscle acts to adduct, extend, and medially rotate the humerus.
Correct.
It is innervated by the thoracodorsal nerve.
Extend.
Now we are going to go to some of the deep
medial
muscles,
rotate.
whilst keeping the muscles
The
as I just described.
Medial rotate. Adduct.
Here we can see the levator scapulae and the rhomboid muscles, which all run from the scapula to the vertebral column. The vater scapulae attaches to the superior angle of the scapula and the transverse processes of the upper cervical vertebra. The muscle elevates the scapula and is innervated directly by the third and fourth cervical spinal nerves and the fifth cervical nerve by the dorsal scapular nerve. Rhomboid minor is attached to the lower portion of the ligamentum nuclei and the spinous processes of C7 and T1. Spine of the scapula. Rhomboid major passes from the spinous processes of T2 to T5 to the medial border of the scapula. The rhomboid muscles retract the scapula and are innervated by the dorsal scapular nerve. I will finish off the extrinsic group with the serratus posterior muscles. The muscles that I have just described are here on the right of the model. The serratus posterior muscles are demonstrated on the left.
Scapula up.
Serratus posterior superior and inferior are really intrinsic muscles of the chest wall, but often get described with the back musculature. The superior muscle passes from the spines of C7 to T2 to ribs 2 to 5. The muscle is innervated by the associated intercostal nerves and may have a role in elevating the ribs, though the function in humans is not known. The inferior muscle is attached to the spines of T10 to L3 and the lower four ribs. It is innervated by the T9 to T12 spinal nerves and acts to lower the ribs. The rest of the video will focus on the intrinsic muscles of the back, and I will start with the superficial group. This muscle layer is located here on the schematic. The splenius muscles are the most superior of the superficial intrinsic muscles. Splenius capitis passes from the masseter process of the temporal bone and parts of the occipital bone to the spinous
This is the
processes
two
of
spots
C7
on the
to
base of the
T4.
spine that we work on as soon as we
Splenius
get someone
capitis
supine.
rotates the head when acting unilaterally and extends the head when working bilaterally.
One side
It is
working
innervated by the
unilaterally
dorsal rami
rotates your
of the
head.
second and third
It'll
cervical
extend
spinal
if they
nerves.
both pull bilaterally.
Splenius cervicis
That's that
is
sore
similar to
spot
that of
right where they
splenius
attach to your
capitis,
skull.
but just located inferiorly to it. It is attached to the transverse processes of the atlas and the axis, and passes to the spinous processes of T3 to T6. Splenius cervicis either rotates or extends the upper cervical vertebra, depending on whether it is contracting unilaterally or bilaterally.
One side
It is
or two
innervated
sides
by the
contracting.
dorsal rami of the lower cervical spinal
So
nerves.
it's the same as the last one.
Erector spinae is a muscle mass divided into 3 individual muscles that include spinalis, longissimus, and iliocostalis. This muscle mass spans the majority of the vertebral column, though each of the 3 muscles are limited to regions of the vertebral column. For example, spinalis spans from the thoracic and upper cervical regions, whereas iliocostalis extends from the lower cervical vertebra to the iliac crest. Consequently, each of the muscles are divided into regional components. Check out the Deep Back Muscles article on the Geekymedics site to learn more about the original components of each of the muscles and the associated muscle attachments. These muscles are innervated by the dorsal rami of the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spinal nerves. The erector spinae muscle group are powerful extensors when acting bilaterally and will produce lateral flexion when acting unilaterally. The spinotransverse and suboccipital muscles form the intermediate layer
Lateral
of the intrinsic
flexion,
muscles
bending
and are
over.
located here on the schematic. The spinotransverse muscles include semispinalis, multifidus, and rotatoris. Semispinalis is the most superficial of the group. It extends from the nuchal lines of the occiput to T10. Multifidus extends the vertebral column, as we can see when semispinalis is removed.
So I'm just going to pause that for a second, which I should have been doing when I talked all along, but that's why when we were getting in there, when we had people prone on the massage table and we're doing that motion, where we're rolling and pushing up and down the muscles of that spine, because they are attaching all up and down. And so really to hit each of those attachments, you got to keep kneading up and down to get through it. We're talking about layers upon layers, and these are the erectors. So they're what puts you bent to standing up, and that they keep talking about unilaterally versus bilaterally contracting. So lateral just means side, right? Una being one, bi being two. So unilaterally means one side is contracting. So if one side of any of these erector muscles just they contract, it's going to make me flex to the right. And then if they both contract, it's just going to make me stand up straight. That was a weird angle, but carry on.
Multifidus is primarily located on the lamina of the vertebra, though it expands to cover the sacrum at the most inferior attachment. The final muscle of the spinotransverse group is rotatoris, which is the deepest of the group. Rotatoris is primarily found in the thoracic region, though it may extend into the cervical and lumbar regions. If we look closer, it is possible to see that rotatoris consists of long and short muscle bellies, where rotatoris longus spans 2 vertebral levels and brevis spans 1. Most of the spinotransverse group are innervated by the dorsal rami of the associated spinal nerves.
So something like the rotatories, you are probably not going to hear about that on a test, but you can see they said that's the deepest one. That's underneath everything else. But that move that I love that goes up the spine addresses even that multiple attachment issue, the multiple attachments along the vertebrae.
Except semispinalis capitis, which is innervated by the greater occipital nerve and the third cervical nerve. All of the spinotransverse muscles are extensors of the vertebral column. If we return to the schematic, we can see the arrangement of this muscle. Generally speaking, semispinalis is located here, multifidus is here, and finally rotatorus is here. I will remove the spinotransverse group to focus on the suboccipital.
And then really quickly, the biggest thing you can take out of that is that when we're working up and down the middle, like they mentioned the rhomboids and the levator scapula before, and I should have paused and really focused on that. I want you guys to remember levator scapula being that muscle that pulls up the scapula and always tends to be sore. But then the rhomboids, how they fold out. And so we're going to do different things to address those versus all of these layer upon layers of beef jerky, basically going up and down your spine, where you're going to want to do more of the cross fiber friction, circular friction, really getting into the thick layers, all going basically superior to inferior up and down the spine.
These muscles are not included in the muscles of the back articles on the website, but I have included them here as they are often described in this muscle layer. The suboccipital muscles include rectus capitis posterior, major and minor, and obliquus capitis superior and inferior. Rectus capitis major attaches to the spinal C2 and the inferior nuchal line, whereas minor passes between the inferior nuchal line and the posterior tubercle of C1. Obliquus capitis inferior attaches to the spinal C2 and transverse process of the atlas, whereas the superior muscle passes between the transverse process of the atlas.
We're going to bounce past that really quick and go to talk a little bit more about some of the lower lumbar vertebral muscles. And then we'll let this video be done.
Sets. The function of interspinalis and intertransversari are not really known, but it is thought that they offer proprioceptive function.
Proprioceptive function, in other words, letting you know where you are in space. That's the proprioceptive nerves.
So let's summarize. The muscles of the back are separated into extrinsic and intrinsic muscles. The superficial extrinsic muscles act on the upper limb, where...
Okay. I just hope that gave you a better visual. We're going to talk about the muscles of the legs too in the next video. I really liked this one. I've been just searching for a good 3D version of so you can picture the muscles and where they are and not just have to be one diagram over and over again. But here, let's get down to the legs. I'm going to go ahead and pause this video. You can take the real quick quiz that comes after it, and then